before we start, do we have any questions? I'm going to do a series of things. We'll have some practice, but are there any burning questions before we start about budgets? Nope. Nope. Okay. So thank you for spending your lunchtime with me. It is like the world's most boring subject besides, you know, physics or something like that for me. But hopefully I'll make it a little fun and interactive. Like I said, if I could see your face, that'd be great because I'd love human interaction. I'm going to share my screen. And so you're going to kind of see the side of my face. Unfortunately, that's how my screen is coming up for us. But I'll do my best to keep going back to the point of reference. So let's share screen and screen one. Can everybody see that presentation? Yes, Sarah? Yes, perfect, Wendy, thank you. Okay, so as we know, community colleges are built on the idea that we have some public funding, federal funding, and some other types of funding sources. It's extremely important for us to understand that the community college, every department, every line item is a business, right? And you have to balance that business. And if we don't balance that business, then we're in trouble, okay? So higher education, just like anything else, is a business. And so don't let anybody ever tell you it's not. It's very important that we understand that purpose. And as good stewards of public money, it's very important that we know what we're doing too. Okay, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about the budget cycle in California community colleges, funding overview. I'm going to show you a sample budget, and budgets are public information, right? So they're on websites, they're supposed to be information that's available to the public at any point. So the budgets that I'm showing you today are from some colleges that are on this call today, but it's just public information, so I can pull it from anywhere, right? So hopefully that will help you as a point of reference. We're going to go over budget codes. What is a budget code? What is an expense, an encumbrance, a resource? What are categorical funds? And then budget planning, okay? If we could take questions at the end, that'd be great. If not, if it's burning, send it in the chat, and I will do my very best to answer it as we go through, okay? So that's today's agenda. So here's the budget cycle. At the community colleges, it starts kind of in, like you could see right there, a little circle, okay? It first starts with the idea of a budget development. Budget development at the community colleges is in the season of March and April, okay? So budget development is done by the directors, the deans, the vice presidents. Everybody's looking at their budget to see how does it compare to last year's budget, and what should we develop for this next year that we might have extra needs or different needs, shifting of funds, things like that, okay? So between March and April, that's when we really start digging down into the budget from the previous year to see how things are going. In June, so from March and April, that's an internal process. The governor of California will approve a budget by June 30th, okay? Now, by statute, the senators and assembly need to give him a budget by June 15th, and then an approval has to happen by June 30th. When you talk about new fiscal year, it's usually in the terms of July 1st. So on July 1st, that's a new fiscal year. Okay, so budgets in the state of California go from July 1 to June 30th. So that's a little bit different than what you probably are used to. An adopted budget happens in September, and a budget revision will happen in October if it needs to happen. A governor can change the budget at any point in time as long as they give us advance notice, but the budget revisions are normally within that season. Spin down, for your purposes, should happen between, I'm going to say January and March. I put there February, March, just because January tends to be one of those months that we're so busy with the startup of the new semester. But February, March is spin down, okay? So what do I mean by spin down? Spin down is, okay, I have $20,000 in this in this account. I need to spend it all by June 30th. What is my plan? Okay, that's when you need to get very aggressive about your spend down. In addition to that, most fiscal groups at the community colleges will have an internal date that they say, okay, you can't have any more large purchases after April 1st or April 15th or whatever that is. So again, if you're planning on buying a piece of equipment or something like that, you need to really be cognizant of what those needs are in February and March. Okay, I saw a chat box come up, but I'm not able to see it. Wendy, is there something relevant to this that I need to talk about? Nope.
It was only to you, Crystal.
Oh, you're okay.
It was only to you, and I was just saying, yes, this is how basic I need it as far as policies and procedures. So don't think it's a waste of time. I get how to do a house budget, but this is the kind of stuff I don't know about. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I like to keep it like very simple, right? To make sure we're all on the same page. But it can obviously get very complex as you go through, and the higher up you go, the more and more complex it gets. But bottom line, the budgets, let me see if I can go back. Previous are going to go in this cyclical understanding, right? So budget development, governor approves it, we can start spending July 1, an adopted budget. Okay, up till there, it's a proposed budget, an adopted budget, budget revision, and then a spend down. So that's the normal, that's the ecosystem of a budget, okay? So funding, we need to know where our money is coming from, okay? And when appropriate, and I use somebody else's text, I put the website on here. And at the end of this presentation, I'm gonna give you 3 websites that you probably should put in a bookmark, okay? So as you can see here, this is an approximation of the funding. And this will vary from year to year in percentages. But state funding is 58% of the total budget. Property taxes and other local is about 32% of the budget. Federal is 9%, and then lottery is 1%. Okay, so this is the breakdown, as it were. Sources of California Community College funding. So you're going to hear some new terms today, and because you have the presentation, it'll be very important for you to write down anything that you find that's new. Unrestricted general funds. Okay, unrestricted, that doesn't mean it's you could buy whatever you want, you know, whatever you please. What it just basically means is that it's a pot of money towards your college expenses that the board, your individual district's board of trustees, is sanctioning for a particular item. That's why budget development happens in March. So in March, we're saying, this is what we think we need to spend. And when we get those funds, that's what we're supposed to spend it on because the board has approved that budget, okay? So these are the funding source: general funds, categorical funds, and capital budgets, okay? So general funds is about 95% of your fund, okay? This is considered Fund 11, okay? So unrestricted general funds is Fund 11. This is based on FTES, so full-time equivalent for the students, and is enrollment dependent. Okay, so obviously if you have a larger college, you're going to get more general fund. If you have a smaller college, you're going to get less general fund. Okay, it's proportionate based on how many students you have. Now, how this is calculated is up for debate right now based on the new funding models that are out there, like student-centered funding models. But since this whole change in the budget's been happening, everything's kind of been put on hold. So we're going to be working off, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to work off of just the idea of, you know, you have one student, you get paid for that student. Okay. Categorical programs. Categorical is a fancy word for grants. So this is grants. Okay. So it's your basic skills grants, it's your CTE SWP grants, so SWP being strong workforce, EOPS, your DSPS disabilities funds, WIOA, whatever that is, that's all in this and it's normally about 3% of the overall budget. Okay. And then capital projects. Now, the state of California will allow a college to actually go out and apply for capital project funds for buildings, equipments, renovations, things of that nature. And that's normally about 2% of the budget. Okay. So that is also enrollment dependent. As you can see, everything is enrollment dependent. Okay. So it's extremely important for us to understand that the larger our college is, the more we will get in terms of FTES and funds. Okay. All right. Fiscal breakdown. It's very simple. There's three. So just think of the three. Okay. There's a federal revenue, a state revenue, and a local revenue. So those are the three revenues. So if we were to look at revenues, okay, is money, right? Money received. So if I'm generating something in the regular world in the market, my revenue is my sale of those items, right? This is the revenue, the money that we can spend in higher education and community colleges is in these three pots of money, okay? So under federal, the Higher Education Act gives a certain portion, WIOA, TANF, student financial aid, veterans education, and Perkins, so or career education, Perkins, and things like that. Okay, so that's your federal dollars. Don't forget that when we go look at that other piece, that's only 9% of the income, right? 9%. It's very important to understand that. State revenue. Your state revenue is your general apportionment, so your FTES generation, right? So how many students are in your classes, butts and seats, however you want to see it, that's where we're getting our revenue, and categorical funds. Okay, so that's SWP, the enrollment nursing grant that we get, Song Ground, things like that. Those are in state revenue. Local revenue is property taxes, endowments and donations. So we're actually going out to get donors. That's all local funds. Contract services. So say you have a contract ed component to your college, that's their local revenue. Okay, so they have their own budget in that association. Any sales that you have, like bookstore sales, marketing sales, whatever that is, that's local revenue. Student fees. Okay, so you know, health fee, gym fee, whatever it is, that's all in there. And then interest and investment income. As you know, all of the boards have an opportunity to take a portion of their budget and invest that and reinvest that. Okay, and it's not the whole thing, it's a small component of it, but they can reinvest and invest that, and whatever revenue is generated because of that investment is also going back into the college. Okay, so actually, you know what? I'm going to stop right there. Questions on this slide or anything before? No? Good. Yay. That means I'm either doing good or talking way too quick. So we're okay? All right.
I have a question just in general about the monies and who runs them. Is it the same at each college? Is it different at each college as far as who develops the budget, who votes on the budget, and who handles each budget item? Can you just address that for a minute?
Yeah, great question. Very similar across all campuses. Okay, so again, remember, the Board of Trustees is the political and fiscal steward of the money, okay, of the college. They're elected officials by the residents of that particular area, and so they're the fiscal stewards. So whatever the general budget is for the state of California, a portion of those budgets go to each college. The ones that are the stewards of those budgets are the Board of Trustees. That's why every time you have budget development or things like that, you can do them all internally. So your directors will give their input, your deans will give their input, it'll go up to the vice presidents for their input and approval. President will give his input and approval, and then the Board of Trustees is the one who signs off. That is bar none the thing that is done at the community colleges. There's really no deviation from that. Does that make sense? Great. So you could see, and this is where you're going to go, oh my heaven. But this is not intended. Again, this PowerPoint's coming to you so you can look at it in a more relaxed format. This is in millions, okay? And this is off the Legislative Analyst Office website. They're the ones who do a bunch of public policies and various things that are associated with funds, okay? Proposition 98 is actually K through 14. So that is K through 12 plus community colleges, okay? So you'll see this fund, Proposition 98. Now, this is in the millions, so if you can imagine, that's a heck of a lot of money, okay? This is what was actually spent. You're always gonna have an actual. You'll have, you'll have a revised, you'll have a proposed, and then you'll have the change. Sorry, let me go back. Come on. And then you'll have the change, the difference between the two items. It's important for us for tracking purposes to understand how much we actually spent, how much we thought we needed, and then how much we actually spent again, right? So you're comparing apples to apples. Okay, so this is how much I think I'm gonna need. This is how much I get. This is how much I spent. Those are always the questions that come up, and that's actual, revised, and proposed. That's the language. So actual, it's you know, you don't have to explain it. Revised is, okay, this is now what the governor is going to give us. Proposed for the next year normally looks at these two items and then projects for inflation or whatever other changes, and then this is the change. So this is how you read this document, and you'll look, it's pretty much what we've already covered: general fund, property tax, right, lottery, special funds. It's all here. So now you can see that, right? Now you get it. This full-time equivalent, this is how many they actually had. This is how many that was revised, the actual number. This is what they thought they would have, and this is the difference. Okay? All right. Next. So this is the college.
Crystal?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, back on that other screen.
Sure.
So I noticed, I understood what you were saying, but then how come the years are different on each of those columns?
You know what? Really good point. I think that for purposes of consolidating the material, they hid some of this view, right? So the actual is the most important thing that you need to have in order to project. So that's why they put the actual instead of, like, this one, obviously 2017 had a revised and it had a proposed, right? So they all 3 years have a revised, have an actual, and have a proposed. But I think for the purposes of this chart, it hid those items. Does that make sense?
If I can add to that, when you draw down reports from these budgetary software programs, you can select what report, and there's probably, I don't know, 50 different versions of the same report. And this is just a consolidated year to year so that they can see the changes over time. But you could draw down a report that showed just 1 year.
Right. And in that year, Sarah, you should expect actual, revised, and proposed every year for all 3 years. Okay. Okay, next. Now, again, this is the College of the Desert's general budget, right? So there's an adopted budget multi-year projection for 2019. And you'll see here that this is available to the public. It has to be made available to the public because they're public funds, right? And so we have to be able to put this out. The board approves it, and then it's made as public information on the board websites. So federal revenue, 2017 actual, revised budget here. So again, it goes back to those 3 areas. Those are the 3. What are your federal revenues? What are your state revenues? What are your local revenues? So I want to stop for a second and talk about local revenues. Ugh, this thing is very sensitive, sorry. Previous. Okay. We know that because of COVID-19, local property taxes have been placed on hold, right? The actual income generation of that. That is why there's so much, not contention, but anxiety about this year's budget, this next 2020, 2021, because this big piece of the pie, 9%, is not available to us to know, okay? So it's very, very important that you understand that when things don't happen on a timely manner is when we're all kind of in that proposed guess game until we can get a solid understanding of where that budget is. Okay, so you'll see a breakdown here: revenues, expenditures, academic salaries, so that's your faculty members; classified salaries, that's your staff members; employee benefits, which are your healthcare benefits, whatever other else; materials and supplies; services and operating expenses; and capital outlay. Again, capital outlay are those large, like buildings. Maybe it's something over 70, you know, every district has a different way in which they define it, but it could be something with a purchase over $60,000 goes into a capital outlay instead of just a regular material purchase. Okay, so that's how it's broken down. This is another example of one. So this is another sample budget. Okay, this is Mount San Jacinto, and they broke it down by category, which is pretty much what we're going to go over in a little bit. But this is, again, same formula: academic salary, classified salary, employee benefits, supplies, materials, other expenses, and then I cut off the capital outlay piece, but it's in there as well. Okay, so again, you'll see actual, adopted, revised, actual, adopted, revised, right? Actual, adopted, revised, actual, adopted, revised. It's always going to be in that format. Okay, and the change is the most important thing. So we expect, for example, if you expect a population boost of 30%, which is unheard of, but say you have a population boost of 30%, your budget for your proposed budget would be huge, right? But what you actually get is going to be a whole lot less, somewhere in between there, right? So that's what you would be accounting for when you're actually putting your budgets together. Okay, so budget codes 101. So I just gave you the big picture, so you guys will know, where's my money coming from? What is it, right? How do I know why and why? What is out there? What's available? Okay, now we're going to talk about budget codes and why it's very important to understand what these codes are. Okay, now budget codes are, if you were to look at your checkbook and it has a routing number, every checkbook has a routing number that's like super, super long. Well, every number in there is a representation of a specific route in which that money needs to take. That is what a budget code is. A budget string and budget codes. Okay, so two words. Budget string are the string of codes that are put together. Budget code is the actual descriptor for that particular expense. Okay, so I like to think of it, and this isn't anybody's, you know, information other than how I kind of plan. There's a stagnant fund, which means don't touch, and there's a dynamic fund, which you can touch. Okay, now stagnant fund category 1, so things that you should not be touching are instructional cost, non-instructional cost, and benefits. And why do you think that is? Why shouldn't we be touching instructional, non-instructional, and personnel benefits?
They're pretty much major operating costs.
Yep. And if we were to say, oh, well, take $10,000 out of instructional costs, what will that do?
Can't pay people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Straight up cannot pay people, right? So very good. So that is why when, for example, Wendy or myself, when we ask for the clinical placement coordinators or whoever's working on the budget, just give me budgets for 4,005. That's because we know you cannot touch 1, 2, and 3. But it's informative for you to know what those things are. So again, instructional cost, we saw it defined as academic salaries in the previous budgets. Non-instructional personnel costs, we saw that as defined as classified budgets, so your staffers. Personnel benefits are your health benefits and other things, okay? So here is, and I sent this to you, so you should have this, and this will be your little cheat sheet, okay? And it may not be exact in every district. So for example, this is Galaxy, the other Fin2K, I think they add another 0 on their elements of it, but it's very similar and overall objective.
And may I say that if you are at home viewing this and it's too small, go up to the top middle of your screen where it says you're viewing Crystal Nasio's screen, click down under view options and you can fit to the screen, or you can enlarge it so you can see it on your end.
And I did send it to you too, so you can have this. The one that I sent you is from fiscal year 2016-17, but it has not changed for a long time. I mean, these are pretty much stagnant items. So again, you'll see permanent instruction is in 1,000, okay? So you have everything in the 1,000s is relevant to academic salaries. So you have everybody from your full-timers, your subs, your folks who might be on sabbatical, your non-instructional folks, maybe they're I don't know, guest speakers or stipends or things like that. That's all in this area. Okay. And then instructional salaries, instructional salaries are within the 1,000. 2,000 are your non-instructional, so all your staffers. So it's all here. Why is it important? Why do you think it's important that there's sub-line items everywhere, every which way? So for example, under here, under non-instructional salaries, why is there a part-time, an overload, a substitute, sabbatical? Why do you think those are that way?
That can help project if we need faculty in the future or.
Very good. Yes. It helps you project whether or not, so you know XYZ person is going to be on sabbatical next year. And when you're doing your budgets, if there's $0 in that area, you're going to need to bring it up, right? So very important to understand these subcategories when you're doing budget development. So have this little cheat sheet with you, okay? In addition, you could see where you underspent too. So say you didn't have substitutes. Well, why are we not using substitutes, right? They have, maybe you did have sick people and they didn't need a substitute, or there's a fear to use substitutes. It's very telling. It's very telling. Budgets are very, very dynamic. Flex hours. So the flex hours are in here. People aren't using flex time. Why? That's for their own professional development. So I have a question from Wendy. So anyone who is hired as faculty that is getting paid a stipend, or an adjunct faculty hired for special project, it's always out of object code 1000. That's right. Okay. So because you are on an academic salary, that becomes out of a 1,000. You're not a classified employee. Okay. Great. All right. So next. Couple of high frequency budget codes you need to know. This is again stagnant budget. Not that you're going to touch it, but that you need to know what they are. So 1110 are instructional salaries. 1330 are adjuncts. So you need to know how much adjunct money you have available. Non-instructional salaries, so special assignments. So for example, curricular things, accreditation paperwork, that is all going to be coded as 1430. Okay, so you're putting a person on a stipend is likely going to be, sorry, Lord, this thing is weird. It's going to be in special assignment under 1430. Flex hours, so it's very important. 2,000 administrative salary, instructional aids. Okay, we know we need instructional aids. We're supposed to have instructional aids. If there's $0 in 2,200, we're going to struggle, right? So we're going to need to figure out where that money went, or if we can move money around so that we have that for budgeting next year. This is 4,000 and 5,000, and it's 2 slides. So I try to do it a little bigger with this one because this one's the one we're going to focus most on. But you have 4,200 books, instructional supplies. These are your basic instructional materials, right? Copying, printing, maybe catering, things of that nature. Under here, under 5,000, you have your contract employees. So say you have somebody who's helping you rewrite a curriculum. It's going to be in 5,000 because it's a service, okay? Your travel, your mileage reimbursement, all of your conferences, that's in the 5,000s, okay? So again, for planning purposes, it's like, okay, well, I know we want to go to Ohio for this large conference next year. Do I have money in that budget? And if I don't, then I need to get some money in there or shift money around, okay? That's why budget development is very important. You have things as simple as repairs. This is extremely important. So there's some monies in repairs and maintenance agreements that we have to understand has to stay there. So for example, if you have a contract service agreement with, I don't know, your Laerdal would be in 5645. And you'd have to make sure you have that money covered year over year over year. This cannot go down to zero unless you want your machines to go kaputs, and they will. So again, being cognizant of what this is extremely important. Okay. And then other services agreements are here. These things normally are more relevant to the business services side of the house, but this right in here, 5648, that's about where we end our stuff. Okay. So in the high frequency budget codes, this is the dynamic stuff, the stuff that you can look at and you can review and make changes to and spend in. Okay, so instructional supplies is 4,300, 4,700 food and catering, 5,000 travel, mileage, conferences, repair, software. So this is all relevant to things that you can spend and look at in your budget. Okay, questions about budget codes so far, because we're going to do a little exercise in a sec. So I saw something come up.
Crystal, I'm just clarifying a few things as you go.
Right, so we're going to talk about budget transfers, but good point, Wendy. It's just like your account at home. If there's no money in it and you spend in it, you're going to get a overdraft fee, right? So you're going to get in a real problem. So understanding where your money is and making those changes before you spend is very important. All right, so this is a little exercise for us, and I know I'm kind of throwing this at you, but this is a budget string, okay? Can anybody figure out any part of this budget string? So remember, Fund 11 is general funds, Fund 12 is grants. So where is this coming from?
The number 8 has to do with the year in which that budget string exists.
So number 12 is showing that this is a grant, okay? What else do we recognize? 1470. We had that in our presentation before. What is 1470? Stipends, okay? So those are stipends. So additional work, non-instructional additional work. All right, so then this one right here, 225. So you've got, it's saying something. Every number in here says something. So this says it's a grant. This says the department it's coming out of. This says the discipline it's coming out of. Okay, so this is a grant that's coming out of career education, that's coming out of, we'll just say sonography, in the year 8, out of this particular resource, out of this particular resource, and this is the type of expense. Okay?
Can you go over oh, never mind. There it is. Hello.
Yeah. So that's how you know. So you'll be assigned in your budget, you'll be assigned. So with Peter, he's assigned 228, okay? And he's 228, I think 3,000, something like that. And so his budget for normal purposes would be 11, 228, 3,000, blah, 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 whatever it is, okay? So we know that that's the nursing budget for MSJC, okay? So is it fund 11 or 12? What area is it coming from? So our area, CTE, at MSJC was 225. But the nursing area, nursing allied health, was 228. So it had a separate distinction here. Then every discipline has their code. What's the fiscal year? And then what's the type of expense? So again, going back to that object code, that's the last thing in your budget string. So where is it from? What am I spending it on? Where is it from? Where am I spending it on? Where is it from? Where am I spending it on? I mean, literally, if you could just remember those things, that'd be huge. Okay, let me go back. Questions on this, because this is critical.
I assume that this is not universal. It is, other than the fund, it's specific to the school.
Correct. Correct. These object codes may change where they'll add a 0 or be slightly different, but the principle is the same. Okay, principle is the same. If you know what you're reading, then it's from left to right. You're reading basically how it gets more and more minute. Okay, so larger fund, department, specific discipline, year in which it's being spent, what is a resource code, and then what's the type of expense. It's the same formula for every budget string. Okay, I'm gonna pause here because I really want us to understand this. Questions, concerns, you're like, what? I lost you. I'm fine with that. We can figure it out.
Good.
You're good? You feeling good? Feeling strong?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sarah.
Just practice.
Yeah, just keep practicing, exactly. And for a particular department, you may have a few different budget strings that are assigned to you as a director, right? So for nursing, it may be 11, 228, 3,000. For CNA, it's 11, 228, 3,001. And so if you're the director of nursing and CNA, then you would have those budget strings associated to you, okay? So every time it would be an approval process as well. Okay. If you hire, Wendy had a question. If you hire a clerical staff, it would be what object code? Good question. What object code would it be? I'm gonna go back to our previous slide, try to help you guys out. If you hire clerical, yes, good job, Tracy. 2,000. So it'd be somewhere in the 2000s. Okay, if you want a new computer, what object code would it be?
4,000s.
Yes, very good. So it's actually different. Could be 4,000 or could be 5,000. So is it a computer for class? Then it's an instructional material. If it's a computer for a, staff member, then it is in the 5,000s. Does that make sense?
And it's also sometimes regulated by how much it costs. If it's over $500, it may be a 5,000. If it's under $500, it might be a 4,000. So even if we know down to the detail of what Crystal's teaching us, we still may have questions for our own fiscal departments because that may vary between schools. So you're never going to know exactly unless you ask.
I'll write it down for later. It's okay.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we'll keep moving. Then you have this presentation so you can review it a million times. Now we're going to go into actual expenses. Okay, expense, encumbrance, budget. Again, those everything's in threes, right? So you had federal, state, local. Okay. Now you had, then you had, what was it? Adopted, revised, proposed. And now you have expense, encumbrance, and balance. Those are the 12 really important things to know. Okay. Expense, encumbrance, and balance. Just off the top of your head, what's an expense? Just anything.
Faculty.
There you go. What's an encumbrance? This is a new one. Nobody really knows that one, so we're going to move that one. What's a balance?
How much
Wait,
you got?
how much you got left, right? Okay, perfect. Thank you. This is the purchase process. Honestly, if I could do nothing more, I would love to just teach you this. This is so important so that you don't get yourself frustrated. And it took me months. Peter can attest, Tracy can attest. It took me months to figure this out. And so I'm imparting my information to you. Hopefully it will help. This is how it goes. Okay, this is the purchasing cycle. So we're talking about buying something or getting a service agreement or contracting it out, something like that. Okay, so this starts with your quote. So say you have a quote for, let's just do something tangible, a mannequin. So you get a quote from Laerdal. Okay, it's placed in your financial system by your administrative assistant, whoever it is, in either Galaxy, FinDuque, whatever they're using. You generate a contract if it's needed, okay? So maybe it's a service agreement. They'll have to generate a contract. And it took me forever to figure this out, but it's a separate system. If it's a system that's a requisition or a system that's a contract, it's normally coded differently, okay? And it's a separate system. So this right here is extremely important. If you're buying something, is it going to require a service agreement? If it is, then it's another couple of steps, okay? But, so you got your quote, you've put it in the little system, you're generating the contract. You're going to go through and have administrative approvals from the dean, VP, etc. It's going to go to the purchasing department. They're going to put a purchase order together and a request from that vendor an invoice, okay? The purchase is processed and then the item is received. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps, if you're lucky, to get something. So you remember, you get frustrated and you will pull your hair out because you don't have your mannequin in 3 months and you ordered it in July and it's January, right? That's because this happens. And then, oh no, XYZ administrative approval, someone forgot to approve it and it's been sitting in their inbox for 5 weeks, right? So I used to call my administrative assistant, Rochelle, the professional nag, and that's terrible because it's a bad word, but it's true. Her whole job was to make sure that I signed and the other dean signed and the VP signed, and she just literally kept emailing people, oh, it's in your inbox, you know, she just kept pushing. That was her whole job. It was literally her whole job. And if she didn't do that, then it would just stop. It was terrible. Okay, and I know this is like our comic relief, right, for the minute, but it literally, if you don't understand this, then you'll get yourself frustrated.
It felt more than 7 steps though, Crystal. It really did.
Carol.
Yeah, it's at COD, we've got that system, but then we've got a whole other one going on just to approve contracts and get everybody's approval. It's
Yeah.
convoluted.
If it worked this way, it would be great, but it's just like,
Yeah.
it always seemed like.
Yeah, follow-up is the #1 reason, and it'll break down. If it breaks down in any part of this, it will add to the time frame. Okay. So I think we lost Sarah. That's too bad. Here are the definitions. Expenses, purchases completed, processed, and debited. Okay, so remember that. It's the difference between a purchase processed and debited, between a purchase that's in process and not debited. A purchase that's in process, so anywhere in that cycle, is an encumbrance, okay? So that's money that should not be touched, but that is going to be touched soon, and so don't count on it. That's a don't count on it zone, okay? And then the balance is the difference between the expense and the encumbrance, okay? So here's your budget, actual. Here's your expense. So you have a $100,000 budget. This is a sample. You have $50,000 in expenses, $25,000 in encumbrances. And so what is your balance? 25,000, right? It's not 50, it's 25. All right. So be very, very cognizant of your encumbrances and the timing of your encumbrances, because if you get to that budget development place and you're not, you know, looking at it right or whatever, you could be in a real world of hurt because it could hit at the exact wrong time, right? And Carol's smiling because she probably knows exactly what that looks like. And this is just another example of like, you know, very, very drilled down. Here's the budget, the actual activity, the encumbered amounts, and the balance. Okay, so that's what a budget sheet would look like. Budget transfers. So Wendy brought up what a budget transfer is. A budget transfer is a transfer from one object code. So it's a 1400 to 1200, whatever it is. Okay, those are the differences. This happens during budget reconciliation or when purchases have insufficient funds. So say you purchased a software and you thought it was going to be $1,500 and it ends up being $1,800 because the rebate that you thought you were going to get no longer exists because you took too long, right? So now you have to pull $300 from some other budget. That is when a budget transfer happens, okay? Because you'd have to reconcile that before the purchase is actually complete. It will stop. The purchase will stop if you don't reconcile that budget, okay? Now, most deans and directors will reconcile their budgets monthly. That is my recommendation. Reconcile your budgets monthly. Don't wait until budget development season or February or March, because then you're going to be in a world of hurt because there'll be a bunch of budgets and encumbrances out there, okay? So the other thing is budget transfers within grants may require a budget modification form. So for example, with strong workforce, you can change within budgets to a certain degree, certain percentage, which is normally 10% to 20% change. If you're going to change a huge chunk of money out of one area and move it to another, you're going to need to work with that particular grantee to see what you need to submit to them for that change. Okay, so there's another level of requirement that might be needed to make that budget transfer. Questions on budget transfer? All right. Expense transfer. People don't understand this very well, so I'm going to spend a little more time on expense transfers. An expense transfer is an expense that was debited from the wrong account and is being corrected. So for example, if you have that, we were talking about a computer, right? Say the computer was taken out of the office fund, but really was supposed to be a computer for a academic fund, like an academic person, then that has to go into another fund, okay? So you can expense against, you could take that, whatever was already debited, and expense transfer that entire expense to that other budget. That's called an expense transfer, okay? So basically what it does is it changes that debited amount into that new credited account, okay? Moves it to that other account, so then you'll reconcile in that account that was accidentally taken from, in the next cycle, you'll be able to see them out back in. Okay.
So I have a couple comments related to that. One is it makes a lot of work for fiscal persons and directors of strong workforce or directors of grants to fix these issues when they happen. And secondly, Crystal, if you could explain that there's a time period in which you can do this. And once you're beyond that time period, you can't go back and fix it.
So in your fiscal year, you need to fix them. So after your June 30th dead time frame, you cannot fix for other years. So again, in that budget development February, March timeframe, it is very important to reconcile. Like I said before, don't wait. Make sure that you do it monthly at the end of the month. I always had my administrative assistants give me the budgets at the end of the month, and I made sure to reconcile anything we needed to at that point. Do you have to note the reason for the expense transfer? Yes, you do. So whether it's internal or whether it is in your like a regional, budget modification, you have to tell them why. You have to tell them why. Absolutely, you do. And where is that note made? So it really depends on the college. Like for MSJC, for example, it's an Excel sheet, right? And then you put it like in a comment. Other colleges may have it within their financial systems where you put a special notation that says rationale for, expense transfer. Here's the other thing. For example, expenses from a general fund can be transferred to grant allocations. So sometimes we have conference, so I'll give you an example. Sometimes you have conference money in your general fund, but you also have conference money in your Song Brown account or whatever other, account. So say for whatever reason you expensed against the general fund, but really it should have been out of Song Brown. Well, you can do that. You can expense to the grant. In fact, I recommend that. Spend your grant money first and then your general fund. Okay, spend your grant money first and then your general fund. Misallocation of funds is a really important term to understand. And thank you, Wendy, for bringing that up. What this is, so it gets into a couple of things that I'm not gonna have time for. That's like 2.0. But the basics is it's an intentional misuse of the money, right? And it is also a non-timely, I should say untimely correction as well. So if it's past that fiscal date, it's a misallocation of funds. So again, as good stewards, we have to make sure that we're keeping our dates on, and that we're keeping that stuff. Okay, categorical funds. Fund 12, so you have Strong Workforce, Perkins, Enrollment Grant, Song Brown, OSHPA, whatever. You have all of these different categorical funds. Grants. Grants require an application, most likely. And this is the process. You have to have it get to the grants officer for college approval. The dean, the vice president, and the president have to approve it before you submit a grant. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do a grant and then randomly put it together. It has to be, systematic. And with a grant, this is a whole nother conversation. So if we want more conversation about grants, we can talk about that. But it's work plan generated. So every activity, whether it's a measurable, it has to be measurable. So say it's, I'm going to increase clinical sites by 10%. Okay. If that's in your work plan, then that needs to be something that you report to. So again, when Wendy and I talk about it's in the grant, it's a measurable outcome, we need to have specific dates and times. That is all data driven, and that's all to be reported out. Most grants are quarterly reports, okay? And then regional reporting is put in a place called NOVA through the community college system. Okay, questions about grants. I'm sure there's a ton of questions about grants, but this is just a quick overview, okay? Budget planning. This is very important. I wanted to make sure we had time for this. Budget planning starts, you should be starting your budget planning in January of every year, okay? You need to look at your budget often, and you need to look at it especially in the new year. even though you have time until June 30th to reconcile everything, you need to have it down by that time frame, completely solid. Okay, so review previous year's budget against what you're spending now. That's an important principle because you want to know, okay, what changes have been made? Have I brought on more expenses than we need? Or do we need to make sure that we go through joint hiring to hire more faculty? Whatever that is, that will tell you in the budget, because you'll see, say for example, with joint hiring, if you're looking at your budget through the lens of how many people I need to hire, you would see an increase in your adjunct faculty, right? You'd be seeing a steady increase that's overwhelming, right? Because you're having to fill that role. Well, that is data that you can take to a joint hiring committee that says, I'm spending 1.5 times more in adjunct salaries, but I could be spending this in a full-time person. Okay, so that's how you substantiate those changes. Consider your categorical fund allocations and work plans when you're budget planning. So I have work, so we have monies in, I don't know, for counselors. Do we need to have that in our general budget? Is it an important principle, right? Is it something that we really need to look at and review? So that's how you look at those categorical things, because sometimes we have a tendency as colleges to get all of this soft money, what we call soft money, categorical money, and we never internalize it. And then when that money goes away, those positions which have become critical to us are now gone. Okay, so that's why budget planning is extremely important, because you could say, okay, well, I have supported this particular person for 3 years on soft funds, but this counselor is seeing 5,000 students in a year. If I don't have that person and that money goes away, I'm going to be in a world of hurt, right? So very important to look at. Pay close attention to your 4,000s and 5,000s. Again, that's the stuff you can really hone in on, change, move things around. Very, very important to look at those things. And then review your program reviews. So all academic programs will have a program review, which means, okay, what are my plans? What are their goals for this particular program? Look at those goals. Maybe it's equipment, maybe it's software, maybe it's people, maybe it's presentations, maybe it's conferences, whatever it is. And then see in your budget if there's an opportunity to move things around so you can support that even in a small way. Okay, so I'll give you an example. When I was at MSJC, one budget, there was 2 programs that had a rather large budget in instructional supplies for Fund 12, which was the lottery money, right? But all the other departments didn't even have a single dime. So when I did my budget development the next year, I requested that every department have a equal amount of instructional supplies in Fund 12, and that was approved. So then my, obscure medical assisting program, whatever, they could have a little bit of money to buy whatever they needed. Okay, so that's very important. You also need to consider statewide landscapes. So right now we have the SWP funds. We need to make sure that we look at, okay, if we lose money, how am I going to keep operations moving?